40,000 roaring orcs. 40,000 roaring orcs.
La 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 la. Okay.
Bruce Colson gives this book 4 stars and says, "Geniuses does not fit into any society, and every society is dependent on them."
Hello there. Welcome to Book Club. I'm Ansel Crowder.
I'm Elijah Crowder.
I'm Dylan Crowder.
This week we read The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Guin. It's a book about a guy from the planet Anaris who is a physicist. Let me tell you, before I tell you about this guy, let me tell you a little bit about his planet Anaris, which is actually a moon of the planet Urus. The Anarestes were given the moon after an uprising on the planet Urus. The uprising was 200 years ago, and the 160th year of settlement. Is that right? Something like that.
Something like that.
And it's about his silly trials and tribulations. Dr. Shevik is how I pronounce it.
Not doctor.
Oh yeah, it's just Shevik. Yeah,
No, it's just Shevik.
They don't do it titles on Anaris. And Anaris is a communal society. The whole planet, or really the moon, the whole society is a communal society with to each according to his need, from each according to his ability. And Urus is a lot like our society, 20th century, late capitalism, and it is, the drama from the book comes from the two opposing societies. Is that fair to say?
I would think so, yeah.
Is that a decent synopsis? So I don't have to take another stab at that?
I think you got it one.
Okay. So people who haven't read the book have an idea of what we're talking about. And there probably are a lot of people who haven't read the book. Because, I don't know, let's start out talking about how easy or difficult the book was to read, or why somebody might have given it the review that you read at the beginning.
I think it was fairly easy to read. It wasn't exactly action-packed, but I don't know. I found it personally very interesting due to the fact of I was highly interested in the anarchist society and it being shown in a functioning manner, and that was very interesting to me. And got a little bogged down in the physics and the lack of action, but for the most part, it wasn't too hard for me to read at all.
Yeah, I'm going to somewhat agree with that. I think once I got to the halfway point, I sort of really started stumbling through it more quickly. And the action's not there. It's not an action novel, really.
Stumbling quickly is called falling.
That's pretty much how I did the last couple of days. I fell through the book, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it at the same time too. And I will admit that I did have to take several breaks. It seemed sort of a monotonous plow through at parts, but then again, after the halfway point, yay, all good.
Yeah, I agree. I had to plow through it a little bit because I didn't really get as far as you guys, so I basically had to read the whole book in a 24-hour period. But once I got on board that train, it was a pretty nice ride, I gotta say.
I will say that the nature of the narrative is kind of split in between two narratives, going back and forth with each chapter, and that would kind of disrupt the flow a little bit, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. After the first time when it jumps back to his childhood, I thought, okay, wait a minute. And then when I realized it was a back and forth after that point, it became a lot easier to follow.
Yeah, I thought so too. I mean, it's I liked how they kind of played around with the time of it, like the I mean, it was kind of like played into the whole idea, his theory of temporal time being temporal and not sequential or not. Well, not. I mean, it's sequential and simultaneous is kind of like his theory. It's a unified theory of like linear time and circular time. I don't really know what that means, but that was in the book. It said that. So.
Well, there's Mr. Lee Hua kind of touches on this on one of his reviews I found on Google. He only gives it 2 stars, but he quotes, "It's won both the Hugo and Nebula Awards, so that I expect highly. The main idea was interested when I read from the back cover. When I reading it, I found the story go on and on until the end."
That sounds. I agree with that.
Well, I kind of hesitate to laugh at. I mean, obviously that grammar's all sorts of messed up, but it could be somebody's second language.
Is it Provic or Iotic?
Regardless of which language it is, I mean, you don't give something 2 stars if you can't write.
Well, wasn't it a positive review though?
I'm not sure. No, it has 2 stars.
So that's a negative. That's a 40 on a test.
Okay, but it sounded like super interested.
But what I have to agree with the final sentence there. When I reading it, I found the story go on and on until the end, and I find that's true of most stories.
Yeah, this one definitely went on till the end. That much is true.
So yeah, one more review, and then we get into the meat and potatoes of it.
Go for it. Yeah.
I think I had one more. It was no, or maybe I don't. CRDF. Yeah, you mentioned this earlier. Second language. This guy says, "The first book I ever read in English. I was aiming too high. I think I should have started with something easier." And Mr. CRDF also gives it 2 stars. So right out of the gate, Mrs. Le Guin is getting hammered here.
So people who had trouble understanding it didn't like it. It turns out.
Yeah, I would say so.
And
mostly people that don't speak English don't seem to like the book very well.
Well, in their defense, I mean, you do kind of like you guys were, or Elijah, you said it was like you needed a break from it sometimes. It was pretty dense, I think. Don't you think it was a pretty dense work of fiction? Not too action-packed, like you said. I mean, I guess when you think of science fiction, you think of lasers, you think of spaceships. There were spaceships, no lasers.
No lasers.
They were like regular-ass machine guns.
Yeah, and helicopters?
Yes.
Like, not even ornithopters. What's up with that?
Exactly. So it was a little bit weird, but yeah, I can get that. If you go into it I mean, I kind of was, to be honest,
Well, I'm not sure where I got it from. If it was one of you guys, somebody said that the only thing it's really comparable to would be Frank Herbert's Dune, and so I kind of went in fully expecting Muad'Dib.
Well, I mean, I think in terms of like a fully realized world, you know what I mean? I think it is comparable in that way. It's like
I agree. I did get that in the end. That the thought processes that went behind the 2 worlds as they saw each other 2 moons, that was really well thought out and really done. But as far as moving along like a Herbert novel was what I was looking for, and it just wasn't there.
Well, also like her reputation is sort of that of a Frank Herbert. She's considered a master of science fiction, a master I'd never read. That's why I wanted to select this one of her books for book club, and this seemed to be the most accessible to all of us. That's why I picked this one.
I will say this is I guess the term would be hardest sci-fi novel I've ever read. It was as far as I can tell, I'm not a man of science very much, but it seems like the science was pretty much on point.
Yeah, the science, just from my experience as a science teacher, I can
apart from theoretical physics. I mean, that was
the science and the math too. I expect maybe you did some research on Miss Le Guin. I would guess that she had a background in physics or math, the way she described relativity and Zeno's paradox and stuff.
No, she didn't really have, as far as I could tell. I did a brief research, but she's pretty much always been a creative writer, from what I could tell.
I believe her bachelor's degree is in French literature, and I believe also a master's degree in French literature that she postponed later and then finished. Yeah. Oui, oui. And her husband is a well-known anthropologist, I believe.
Okay, so that's surprising that she doesn't have any background in math or science, because it was pretty on point, I think. I mean, I guess I'm sure it's an interest of hers. It's got to be because,
And she probably did a shit ton of research.
Yeah, I would think so.
Well, here's what I'm curious about. The star that the two planets revolve around is a real star. It's called Tau Ceti.
Yeah.
And in the book, it mentions that they were in a sublight ship and traveled for almost 11 years to get there. It's 12 light years away, actually. but then it was mentioned later.
Well,
This book was written in 1974. Yeah.
Yeah. So the universe has expanded 1 light year since you wrote it. Which
So, Mr. Physics teacher, tell me quickly. How quickly does the universe expand? Can it make those? What is that?
Well,
how many
it's
years?
accelerating, so I can't say now because I don't know the rate of acceleration. But in the last 40 years, it's expanded 1 light year, according, if she did her research as we all agreed that she did.
I assume she did, and we'll just go with that.
Works for me.
All right, cool.
So one of the things that I liked, I'm just gonna insert this because it was mentioned in the book, and it's also something I really love. Is Zeno's paradox. Are you guys familiar with Zeno's paradox?
Nope.
No.
Okay, so I'm going to explain it to you, and I think I'm going to blow your minds.
Is that the throwing the rock at the
yes,
tree? Okay.
Absolutely. So throwing the rock at the tree, the rock always has half the distance to go, so it can never reach the tree. That's one way to say it, but I like the Achilles and the tortoise explanation better. Have you guys heard of the Achilles and the tortoise thing?
No.
Okay, I'm going to tell you then. Since you've never heard it, and since I've set it up for me to tell you, I'm going to go ahead and tell you Achilles and the tortoise. Now, I do love Zeno's paradox. It's like, okay, so Achilles is the fastest person on Earth when he was alive. Okay?
What about his heel? I thought he had a bad heel.
Before pre-heel. His heel was intact.
Okay.
Fastest person in the world. A tortoise challenges him to a race, and he convinces Achilles to give him a head start. And then the argument was, I think this is pretty sure it's an ancient Greek.
Yeah, with a name like Achilles, yeah.
Yeah, as a rhetorical exercise, yeah. So the idea is that, all right, suppose that assume that the tortoise goes at a constant speed. It doesn't matter, like real slow, okay? So the tortoise goes at like a mile per hour. He gets a head start. Now, in order to catch the tortoise, Achilles has to arrive where the tortoise is at that moment, right? When he starts, okay? Achilles starts, and before he can pass the tortoise, he has to arrive at the point he is at, right? So,
He has to catch up to him.
Yes, he has to catch up to him.
Okay.
But in the time it takes him to catch up, the tortoise would have moved farther. All right?
Yes.
So we pause right there. Now to pass the tortoise, he has to arrive at the point where the tortoise is at that point. So it's going to take him some time to reach that point, and in that time, since the tortoise is going at a constant speed, the tortoise will have moved farther. And you can continue this forever and argue that Achilles will never actually catch up to the tortoise. That's the same with the rock hitting the tree. There's another one with an arrow, like an archer never being able to hit the target with an arrow. But anyway,
Is that kind of the same thing as like a J curve infinitely approaching zero?
yep, yeah, that's the idea. It's like
that makes a lot more sense to me than the allegory. Like, if you think about it in real world terms, like, of course the Achilles is going to catch the tortoise at some point.
right. Yeah, sure. But the idea, like, logically, the logic is like ironclad. You can't, like, whatever argument you have, well, you're like, wait a minute, the tortoise is moving at a constant speed, so it's gonna take him some time to catch up to the tortoise. In that amount of time, he will have moved farther, and so on and so on. But the idea is that time converges to zero.
What speed is Achilles moving at?
Well,
I mean, this is. I see the.
It's irrelevant for the.
No, it's not. He's faster than the tortoise.
I mean,
so
yeah.
if the tortoise moves 1 mile an hour. That's what you said, right? And Achilles is doing 30. Then the distance of him closing up is continually getting shorter every time.
Well, we know that he's going to pass the tortoise, but
I'm just making sure.
Yes, but you're laying a logical groundwork that says that Achilles can never pass the tortoise, and unless you have this idea of convergence and calculus, then you can never really say that Achilles. I mean, it's a logical exercise more than a practical exercise.
I think the allegory is kind of problematic, though, because when you put it in the allegorical terms, at least maybe it's just the way my mind works. Like, it makes it harder to conceptualize than a J curve infinitely getting closer to the x-axis, or just simply stating that there's an infinite number of decimals in between 0 and 1.
Yeah,
like that makes a lot more sense to me than the fastest man in the world not being able to catch up with a tortoise.
Well, to me, it just seems like a whole lot of mental exercise when they could have just eaten the spice and folded time and space. but I mean, yeah, Hugo Award winners. What are you going to do, right?
Well, yeah, that's another thing. To get off the topic of Zeno's Paradox, like this was an award-winning book. It got the Hugo Award, and what else?
Nebula.
The Nebula. I'm not really sure the prestige of either of those awards, but it sounds important.
Those are the most prestigious, I believe, sci-fi and fantasy awards.
You'd be correct, yes.
Okay, so she's kind of a big deal, as Ron Burgundy would say.
Yeah. It's funny, I've never heard of her before. Never heard of her before. You brought this book up, and should have. Really, really good book, and really well written, I think, but it's weird that I've read sci-fi for so long and just, this is not a new book. This is not a new thing,
Well, I mean, that's the thing. I worked for 5 years at a bookstore, and I saw like a lot of books that I knew were like cult classics, even, they weren't labeled as such, but the fact that they were 50 years old and we kept them in stock, I was like, okay, I'm going to make a mental note of this, and one of these days I'm going to come back and read this book. This is one of those books. So many sci-fi books that I've flagged for reading later. But yeah, this is the first book of hers I've read too.
And just to kind of follow up on that, like, I know you guys, I'm a huge fan of science fiction, film, and TV shows. But when it comes down to it, I haven't really read very many sci-fi classics. There's Dune. I've read like Fahrenheit 451, and I can't think of any Isaac Asimov that I've read off the top of my head.
Well, I was thinking that too when I picked it. I think sci-fi is like the genre for us, for us, because I mean we all clearly have an interest in it. Like we all like Star Wars. I like Star Trek. I don't know if you guys do, but
I kind of lean more towards fantasy, but I also enjoy a good sci-fi.
Yeah,
I lean more towards hating Star Trek, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's just like tribalism. That's so Eurosty.
I agree. When I was a kid, I was Star Wars all the way, anti Star Trek. I think
Star Trek is actually like real science fiction. You know what I mean?
I've heard Star Wars called science fantasy, and I think that's more apt because I mean there's swords and space magic. I think science fantasy is a better term for Star Wars.
It's not so much science at all. I mean, I would put it in the same category as Indiana Jones, not just because Harrison Ford is in it, but just because it's like
more entertaining,
badass action, nonstop, and excitement, and like Harrison Ford.
Star Wars, there's a lot more fantasy involved, though. It's pretty much a straight ripoff of like ancient epics and samurai movies, and there's you got swords and space magic. You could rewrite the Star Wars saga and set it in a fake England, and you got your next Game of Thrones.
Okay, I think you were going to say something. Go ahead if you were going to say something, because I was going to.
I've lost the thread. Go ahead.
I forgot to give a structure at the beginning of the episode. At the end of the episode, we were going to talk about science fiction generally, but I forgot to tell you that. Let's stick to the book, and we'll come back to this if time permits. I want to talk about the major themes from the book. What do you like? Yeah, what do you what kind of struck a chord with you on what do you think of the Eurastes? What do you think of the Anarestes? Do you think that they can live together? Do you think they can reconcile their differences?
I don't think so at all. The best case scenario is that I don't know. I don't think capitalism can survive. Just rampant capitalism can survive with an example of anarcho-communism so close at hand. The lower class will always aspire to that.
Well, I think what's key there is it's having to compete and survive next to a working, functioning, and very well thought out
non-authoritarian or non-authoritative.
Yeah, communistic society that is actually working on a barren planet, no less. They have nothing, and
cacti and fish.
Yeah,
and
and
each other.
So yeah, I totally agree with Dylan on that.
Well, I will be the devil's advocate here. One of the things was like Atros, was that the guy's name, the physicist on Urus, the old guy that he actually liked? It started with an A, Atros or something like that. Whatever. I think he said something about like definition by exclusion or something like that. So like Urus kind of needs Anaris to sort of define who they are. I mean, there were a lot of examples of that, like the sequential physicist needs what was the other one?
Spontaneity? No. Spontaneity. What was it?
Simultaneity.
The physics are dead on.
So it was like it's kind of like a yin and yang thing. Like the each needs the other. So in a way, they already are, coexisting and all that. But they're both both planets are taught to hate each other. They have their propaganda where Eurastes seem more interested in Anarestes and Eurastes. I mean, they were sort of given propaganda from an early age about how filthy those capitalist animals were on Urus.
Right. And I don't know, it seemed to me like there wasn't really much contact between the two worlds. There was just the ships going back and forth that would trade some supplies and ideas. Like the book, once he finally got it published, went across the ships, but anyone from the other planet wasn't allowed outside of that little exclusion zone on Anaris. So,
well, on Anaris too. Like, I mean, the physics department at the university, they seem to have regular contact with Urus, and they had the Iotic dictionary and all that stuff. So maybe there was a little bit more contact going on than the sheeple were led to believe.
But yeah, I don't. I'm just going to kind of repeat what I said prior. I don't believe that the capitalist society could continue to exploit its workers and its lower classes with and maybe that was part of the problem, that they just didn't see the functioning society that was on Anaris. Maybe they got the propagandized version, but yeah, I just don't see how. Well, specifically, what was the name of the nation? AIO.
Yeah, AIO is how I pronounced it.
Mm-hmm. And then what's interesting is you get the flip side of that too, where the Urasti.
I called it Eurasti. Is what I call it.
Urasti. The Urasti people, they were portrayed to the children on Anaris. As basically all prostitutes, and you also had this propagandized version of what the other side, what the capitalist side of the coin was. I found that to be quite interesting, that she played that off of each other, and I don't think it was so prominent as far as the Urasti looking at the Anaris as just these horrible people. I mean, they took him in, sure they were buttering him up, but it was really interesting that even at a young age they said, Why do we just believe that this is the way it is on the other planet? And
yeah, that was the Tyrion guy who ended up going to their version of a mental
The
institution.
asylum, yeah, exactly.
And Shevik said that he was right all along when thinking back about it. I also thought like, oh crap, what was I going to say? Well, I had this quote. I had something to tie into what you were saying with this quote, but I don't remember exactly what it was. But I'll say the quote anyway. Talking again about how I think it was definition by exclusion is what Atros said. He said, "You need distance, interval. The way to see how beautiful the earth is to see it from the moon. The way to see how beautiful life is from the vantage point of death." So this idea that you can't really. I mean, there are those are a ton of examples that I should have been writing down the whole time. Like even on just Anara society, there are a lot of we can't really understand how it is without the lack of it and stuff like that.
You can't see the forest for the trees.
No, it's like you can't see the forest for the desert would be,
and
more
the rock won't hit that tree.
Yes, never.
Yeah, okay.
According to what do you guys think about something that I liked was like the description of Urus from like a guy who'd never seen it before. It's like
I'm sorry. Try that again.
What do you guys think about how Urus is described?
Saggy.
All right. So like, okay. So when you were saying when Elijah, you were saying you needed a break.
Right. A few breaks.
I did not take a break. Instead, to like shake things up a bit, I pronounced Urus as Uras, and it kind of livened things up a bit, I would say. And it's kind of like Uranus a little bit. I think that might be the inspiration for Urus.
Mine needs no inspiration. No, I you mentioned that, and I did the same and found it to be hilarious for the second half of the book. I do appreciate that, Handel.
Yeah, no problem.
But yeah, the descriptions of your ass from someone who had never seen it before.
Yes,
was the question, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, he saw it as beautiful. He saw almost everything as beautiful and breathtaking and bewildering, but
Well, that's coming from the vantage point of someone that's lived their entire lives on a desert planet, and it's a lush, vibrant, verdant world.
Well, there's that, and exactly. And on top of that, his handlers made darn sure that he wasn't seeing any of the slums, any of the factory workers' conditions. I mean, he was seeing nothing but the most pristine sides of the planet, and so of course he's going to be, he almost wants to be one of them by the time he's done describing it himself.
Yeah, and the newspaper that they keep giving him, that they're like, oh, this is just garbage. This is just
the Sun Examiner.
Yeah, but that's actually what was actually going on. But why were they giving him that paper?
That actually reminds me of an anecdote. During the Cold War, towards the end of it, I can't remember which Soviet president it was. It might have been Gorbachev. Came and paid a visit to America, and they took him to a supermarket, like a Walmart or like a Piggly Wiggly or something, and he thought it was staged.
Or a Jitney Jungle.
Or a Publix, a Kroger, etc.
A Trader Joe's?
No, not a Trader Joe's. But no, he thought it was staged, so he had them. Have you heard that before?
I have heard that before. I can't remember exactly where, and Google's not working right now, or I would source it. But yeah,
or which one? Like I want to say it was Gorbachev, but I could be wrong. But yeah, like he thought it was staged, and that would be kind of the thing that they would do in the Soviet Union, or even today in North Korea. Like the tourists only see
what dear leader wants them to see.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fair. I mean, there were a lot of descriptions and observations or accounts of Urus that really kind of
We are 12 years old.
I'm permanently 12 years old.
I can't stop. I'm sorry.
So when they get all up in Urus,
Look, we got to finish this podcast. So from now on, Urus is referred to as we need another name for it. Boo Boo.
Planet U. Boo Boo will never work. Come on, you just said yourself.
It's Urus.
It's Urus.
It's Urus. It's
No.
Urras. It's just Urus.
That's like Uranus. I'll never call it Uranus.
Yeah, no, it's Uranus.
And Urus.
All right, fine. It's Urus. We just have to be big boys about it.
Okay, well, the thing about when they get all up in Uranus, I mean Urus. When they-
I've got a Urusology appointment on Monday. This is not that funny to me.
All right. So when the Anastares, or when Shevik reaches the alien planet, his observations kind of hold up a mirror to our own society. A lot of faults that we have that we don't even recognize, like one of the things. I mean, there are a million, and from now on, from this episode forward, I'm going to highlight and write down more stuff. But the one that I did write down was like, let me read it here. In escaping his guides and guards, he had not considered what it might be like to be on one's own in a society where men did not trust one another, where the basic moral assumption was not mutual aid, but mutual aggression. He was a little frightened. So, I mean, don't you think that that's kind of something that we take for granted, that, like, you go out anywhere and it's just like it's like a jitney jungle out there. It's a little bit, it's a competition everywhere you go, and that's
Absolutely.
something I just kind of took it. It's obviously it's cultural and something that everything is competition, but it ought not be. I mean, it doesn't have to be.
I don't know how really political we want to get with this podcast. I don't know if we want to alienate any listeners, but
Let's alienate. I mean, listen, man. The only people who would be pissed off about whatever we have to say politically wouldn't be tuning into a podcast called Book Club. You know what I mean? Don't you think?
I think you're. I don't know. I don't think you can paint with that broad brush.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I'm sure Alex Jones fans read books from time to time. Perhaps. It is an interesting.
I did read a really lovely fantasy novel one time about the gay frog that drank the water.
What are you talking about? I don't even know.
Okay, Alex Jones has a very famous rant about the water turning the frickin' frogs gay,
No, I don't really know that.
and thus turning the people gay as well. The government's putting you need to brush up on your InfoWars, man.
Well, I mean, I know, like, I don't know. Conspiracy theories are kind of repulsive to me, like chemtrails and frog.
Yeah, well, he's nuts. I mean, in most cases, frogs are not people. I'm just going to go ahead and put that out there. He fails to see that right.
You know
from
what?
the
He
get-go.
kind of looks like a frog, doesn't he?
Kind of does. Now that you mention it.
I think the proper term is lizard person.
But
That would make sense. He would be like the lizard person. Don't you think? He's like hiding in plain sight. He's like the guy.
it's Alex V. Jones.
And he's also projecting onto others to kind of throw them off the scent.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He is maybe the only lizard person.
the quote, everything being a competition everywhere you go, and not being able to trust, and everything being the opposite of that. The thing you just read.
Yeah.
I didn't mark that either, but it really struck me as, growing up in a very small town and now living in a very large city. That is something that I actually physically know and deal with on a daily basis.
Not just a large city, but you live in a large city in a more socialist society.
Even so, even that being the case, I've seen with my own eyes that the idea of this is my personal space and my area, and anything that happens outside of that doesn't affect me directly, I can ignore and walk by. And I think in the book they even mentioned like they're walking by the people passed out in the gutter and not paying attention to it. And how abhorrent that is to him. That's something I've had to come to terms with in my own life.
Well, that happened on Anaris too. If you'll remember, I'm glad you said that because that made me think. You remember when there was a food shortage during like toward the end of the first year of the big drought,
right?
And their train of like 500 people stopped in this town to get some refreshment. And he said that's when people were becoming propertarians. Is like they would avert their eyes, they wouldn't look at them, they would barricade themselves. I don't even think
pretend that there's no hungry people there,
right? Yeah, and they would hold their food. I don't even think that they had locks on their doors in Anaris. You know what I mean? It just seemed like that free and open, but it seemed like pretty propertarian when the hungry people came to town. And, I think what she was getting at was that, that competition that, is like basic, when it comes to scarcity, we fall back on this more primitive Urus type stuff. You make your ass out of you and me. I was trying to get. It didn't quite work, but I was trying for something.
See where you're going with it.
But anyway.
Okay, since you have a quote underlined and you wanted to share it, I've got a really short one. Can I?
Yeah, you knock yourself out.
We're getting into the political stuff here. Just the state recognizes no coinage but power, and it issues the coins itself. I found that to be very, wow, slap Marx in the face, and while you're at it, kick capitalism in the teeth as well. That was just sort of that's Shevik's coming to realize he made a huge mistake in even coming to your ass. and on top of that, that's a very broad statement, but he also came physically with no coinage, nothing to trade. He came there empty-handed. And I thought, wow, that's cool that she throws that in there as a little... He's empty-handed and realizes that's the worst thing he could have ever done.
Well, he had that prize money, but I mean, just the concept of power. I don't think really. Not only did he come up with, did he think that, but he understood what power actually. The concept of power on Anaris was like a shifting administrator every week or every decade or whatever.
Or the physics administrator that he had that wouldn't let him get his things published just because he was a pain in the Urus.
Well, no, he was a simultaneous, and that wasn't going to fly on Anaris, where everything was practical, pragmatic. You couldn't be a theoretician on Anaris, where it was just like everything had to be practical, right?
Right.
Well, if nobody's going to say anything, does anybody have anything really clever to say right now?
Nope.
No.
Okay, so I'm going to take this opportunity. We're going to take a quick break and get a word in from our sponsor.
We got a sponsor?
Yeah, we have sponsorship now. We're officially a podcast now. We have sponsors. So your check's in the mail.
As a anarchist, I do not approve of this.
Well,
propertarian bastard.
I mean, we have to, we put our blood, sweat, and tears into this podcast, and we need something to show for it, right?
Well, let it rip. Let's see what it.
Okay. Word from our sponsor. We will be back in a moment.
Has this ever happened to you? Ugh. Ooh. Eee. Ugh. So we have the product for you. Just take this right here, move it this way, then do this, move it around, push it that way, and you're set. Just look at what it can do. This and that. Look how easy this is.
Every time I wanted to do this, I didn't have a way. But now with my WYSIWYOW, it's so simple.
Do you ever find yourself in this situation? Watch this. Ha! Problem solved.
I never thought that I could be able to do this. Just look at me. The WYSIWYOW is a miracle maker.
Look how easy it handles that. Just look at it. Have this problem? Watch this. See? No problem anymore.
I mean, the WYSIWYOW is what I need because I didn't know what I was doing when I was doing this. Look at my hand. Look at my hand. Look what it's doing. And now, with the WYSIWYOW, I can just do this.
With our new WYSIWYOW, you can solve all your problems. Order now on the number below, or go to this website, right here. Don't be this guy. Be this guy. Order now at the number below on your screen with our new WYSIWYOW. All your problems are solved. All your problems are solved. All your problems are solved.
And we are back. And before we start, have you guys picked up a WYSIWYOW yet?
I got my order in the mail.
No, I don't.
You don't need you don't have that problem?
No, it's never happened to me. I mean, I don't do a lot, to be honest. I'm a very lethargic person, but I mean, I'm sold if I find a chance to need one. That's what I'm going to get.
Well, I mean, that thing, you remember what I did for 4th of July?
Oh, yeah.
That was most, like, 90%. I wouldn't have been able to do it without WYSIWYOW.
I wasn't there. What did you do?
All right. Let me cover my mic. All right. Anyway, let's before we move on to a different topic, what do you think happens to Shivek and this new guy? You know, this guy is like, he has ample warning. He's like, Shivek's like, you don't want to go on Anaris. You're not going to survive. You might get your face smashed in with a rock as soon as you move past the airfield or whatever. I don't think things worked out for that guy moving to Anaris. I don't know, like he has this romanticized thing of like living on a desert with just cactus and fish. I mean, it actually the people there sounded great in a way, but this guy, I don't think you can like just go into the 100 or like the 7th generation of the settlements and adapt to it. You know what I'm saying? I think that guy probably had a tough going into Anaris. And for that matter, maybe even Shevik, he might have gotten smashed with a couple of rocks coming back home too, don't you think?
Well, they mentioned right at the end that maybe the tide was turning a little bit into Shevik's favor a little bit.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
So I mean, there was probably a tough period for the Anaresti, but I think they would have been fine. I mean, it would have been a very hard transition for the Hainish band, but
well, I guess now that I think about it, we could actually find out what happens in a future episode of Book Club by reading the Hainish Cycle, which I hope we get to do one day.
I'm on board with that. I definitely would like to continue this series.
Yeah, I think we should. It's not going to be next time. I mean, I have my next several picks already picked out, but
just a quick question about the chronology. The Hainish cycle happens after they come back to Anaris?
The Hainish cycle. All right, this is basically like the episode 1. This is like the Phantom Menace.
This is the prequel.
Yes, this is the prequel of everything that happened. So like the Ansible or whatever. I kind of read this when I was trying to find out the chronology of it, because the early Hainish novels are not as well thought of. Like they were the first novels she ever wrote, I think. So I was trying to figure out, like, if do they need to be read? And like her masterpiece is a book called The Left Hand of Darkness, and that's the one I kind of want to get to in a future book clubbing. But what was I saying? This was like the Ansible that they developed for this is like a feature of the other Hainish novels, like where they're able to transport messages from to all the planets like instantaneously. So that's that. This is like sets that up for that later. I did read that.
Very cool. Well, before we what's next?
I think we kind of started going down the road. Anything else to say about this novel before we kind of turn it to just general sci-fi?
I do have a passage that's not long, but longish. But it really, to me, kind of hits home on the whole novel. That I like to pick out one thing that's sort of like, and it's Takver, his wife, Takver.
The way I pronounce their names is like I always stress the first syllable. I try to make it sound like a medicine or something like that. Really, like sort of, right. It's really not inhuman a little bit. So
ask your doctor today about Shevik,
Takver, Sadik. Sadiq. Maybe you pronounce it as like Sadik.
Yeah, Sadiq is what I went with.
Yeah, I did at first, but I was like, no, I think their name should be like almost non-human sounding.
Before we go on, what interesting thing I want to talk about the naming. It mentioned in the book how everyone was assigned their name by a computer.
Yes.
And the names were made available as the previous owner passed away.
Right.
How would y'all feel about that? What sort of ties? Because like a common detraction of communism is that it strips away the individual. And how do y'all feel about your connection to your name?
Well, my friend in Russia, Error 404, he seems to think it's quite all right. So that's a stupid joke.
Yeah,
sorry. I wanted to
I'm gonna take a serious answer on this one. I feel a huge connection to my name. Our parents gave us really cool names, all three of us, and they've kind of become an identifying marker. But how would I feel about it living in a commune that actually functions? And I see that it's. I mean, there's even a fight. There's Shevik and Chevet. One of them says you have to change your name because it's too close to mine. These are things that they become deeply invested in. It becomes a badge of honor to them that their parents didn't select their name. It becomes this badge of altruism and, I guess,
dispossession. I would say,
There you go. Dispossession. I would have to think if I was raised on Inaris and then that was the mode, then I would be okay with it. Here, kind of like the fact that I could name my own children.
I'm gonna disagree. Like I don't really have a personal connection to my name. Like if I had been named anything, I would still answer to it and I would still identify myself by that name, but the name in itself doesn't make a huge difference to me.
That's a perfectly viable opinion too. I mean, I can see that plain as day. That's true. I mean, I'm glad I'm not Fido, or when you say I would answer to whatever, I'm a dog named Dog. I mean, yeah, but you have to think this is a completely selfless society that they're living in, and I think that's a huge symbolism for them, and something that they really sort of latch onto is that they didn't get to choose who they are or where they are so much.
But none of us get to choose who they are or where they are.
That's true too.
Boom, roasted.
I give. All right, Takver, Shevik's wife, says at one point, hold on. Now I've lost it. No.
Nope.
No, that's not it. She's looking at him. He's asleep, and she says, "We came from a great distance to each other. We have always done so over great distances, over years, over abysses of chance. It is because he comes from so far away that nothing can separate us. Nothing, no distances, no years can be greater than the distance that's already between us. The distance of our sex, the distance of our being, our minds, that gap, that abyss which we bridge with a look, with a touch, with a word, the easiest thing in the world. Look how far away he is asleep. Look how far away he is. He always is, but he comes back, he comes back, he comes back." I love that. That was really, really cool, and it's so deeply ingrained into everything that these, what are they called, Odonians on Anaris believe, that it's, that a journey, I think they say a journey is not a journey unless you make the return. And they're so tied to their planets, their families, their friends, their, what they are latched to through this upbringing on this communistic. I just found it to be beautiful, and I found that to be a beautiful way for her to sum up this ring of life that's on every book, this circular sort of cyclic thing that's, I mean, even the names themselves, you don't get a name until the other person that had that name has departed from the planet. Really cool stuff, really well thought out. I mean, and not so much agreeing or thinking that, you know, we should just immediately revolt. Anywho.
Well, I mean, I gotta be honest. I was like looking at my other the other things that I highlighted. I wasn't really paying attention.
It wasn't important. It wasn't important.
I'll go back and overdub like a real response here.
No, you won't.
Okay,
we do it live.
We do it live. Okay. This is the last thing I highlighted, and this was a pretty scathing remark to make. All right, are you ready?
No, do it.
He had mentioned like what was his name? Atro, the physicist Atro, had tried to explain to him the military hierarchy, like, you know, the privates take orders from the captains, or no, not captains. You were in the army, you can do. Anyway, captain,
Privates,
lieutenant, general,
sergeants, lieutenants.
exactly.
Yeah,
So he was saying that they didn't make any sense to him. What a stupid structure that was. And then after the massacre, you know, during the revolution, or I guess the failed revolution, he understood why it was structured that way. And he says, no rational form of organization would serve the purpose. He simply had not understood that the purpose was to enable men with machine guns to kill unarmed men and women easily and in great quantities when told to do so. Only he still could not see where courage or manliness or fitness entered into it. So, as a pretty hardcore, pretty awesome thing to say.
Yeah, and you can apply that to any military organization in the history of mankind, I believe.
Yeah, you know, I personally watched kids get brainwashed, and that's fairly true. So yeah, never had to pull the trigger myself, and yay for that. So right up top, high five, right on.
And when you think about it in those terms, it really makes the glorification of the military that we see here in the United States especially sickening.
Well, I think there's a loss. Okay, we're gonna get political for a second. There's a clear division line that's never been driven. There's never been put in the sand, and that's that there's a difference between what the revolutionary armies of 1776 accomplished compared to, I mean, like, you hear it every day, like, oh, they're fighting for our freedom. Like, you can blow up as many people in Somalia as you want. It doesn't affect my freedoms whatsoever in this country. And yeah, so that disconnect's never been made in this country, and that's a huge problem that has to be addressed. But you know, somebody once said geniuses does not fit in any society, but we depend on them.
Well, I mean, I'm liking that quote more and more. I think seems very interested.
How many geniuses do you know?
How many geniuses do I know? That's a good question.
Geniuses. And is that the plural of genius?
I don't know. I don't even know.
I think it's
I'm no
genie.
genius.
Genie. Yeah. That's the plural of geniuses.
Yeah, that's what I thought. 'Cause
What's the term for a group of geniuses? Like a murder of crows, a
scraggle of geniuses,
a Scrabble.
a Scrabble. There we go.
Scrabble
Yeah, that's
of
perfect.
geniuses.
Yeah, that would
That's
be.
it.
That'd be
I couldn't remember, but that's it.
yeah, Scraggle's not in the dictionary, but I bet Scrabble is.
I bet Scraggle is in the dictionary.
Scraggle?
Yeah, Scraggle is like scruffy, scraggle. Yeah, I bet it's a word.
No,
Perhaps.
you're thinking of that old Jim Henson TV show, Scraggle Rock.
No, I mean scraggly is an adjective that we've all heard. Anyway, this was not supposed to be the episode of whether things are a word or not. This was supposed to be. I meant to say this at the beginning. I got to get my act together. This episode, I wanted to be the episode of mixed metaphors. I wanted to hear mixed metaphors throughout the episode, but I forgot to lay that out there. So before we give our rating, does anybody have any cool mixed metaphors? I've heard a couple recently that I really liked. Would you like for me to?
Go ahead.
Okay. Then you can think about your own while I'm saying these. I heard on the news, just this weekend, somebody said, talking about a law, a piece of legislation coming down the pipe. They said, we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. The baby needs diaper change. We don't want to drown the baby. I was like, that's awesome.
Wait, again? What?
Okay, we don't need to throw out the baby with the bathwater. The baby needs a diaper change. We don't need to drown the baby. Somebody actually said that on the radio. Also, I read one of my favorites of all time. I don't remember who, what, when, where, but this is out there in the world too. Somebody said, if you open up that Pandora's box, you'll find it's full of Trojan horses. So, do you guys know of any?
That's terrifying to think about.
Yeah.
I always like to say we'll burn that bridge when we get to it.
I like it. Oh, I say don't count your gift chickens in the mouth before they hatch. That's my favorite.
I have none. These are great. Keep going.
I think that might be. I might be scraping the bottom of the barrel. But I wanted you. The idea was I wanted you to sort of scraggle these throughout the episode, but I forgot to say that at the beginning. So my bad. I'll be a better host next time.
It's really funny that you say I burn my bridges. I'll burn that bridge when I get to it. I say that all the time. Yeah, that's cool.
I love that one.
Did we get it from each other?
It's very
Possibly so.
It's a very Crowder thing to say. I would say
It's also hilarious.
it's an uncle joke. Not really. Okay, let's give our ratings. And then we'll move on to Elijah, your choice. I'm going to assign the ratings.
Well, weren't we going to have a brief conversation about science fiction in general, or are we running out of time?
I think we're running out of time. We'll have to do that next time, right?
Next time we're talking about science fiction?
Next science fiction book, we'll talk about science fiction generally. Okay, real quick. Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars.
Star Wars, but I don't hate Star Trek.
I'm going to the dark side a little bit. It used to be Star Wars, but yeah, the Force is pulling me towards Star Trek.
I will say, and I know you said real quick, but I really like the new Star Trek movies. And from cultural osmosis, I've kind of picked up that a lot of the hardcore Star Trek fans don't care for the new Star Trek movies.
Right. There's some weird thing, like if the most, or not the most, I haven't seen the most recent, but the second one that was sort of a reboot of Wrath of Khan, not a reboot, but a rehash. To see Spock jumping on moving trains and punching dudes in the face, I was like, that's not Spock. But some Trekkie friend of mine explained to me that, oh yeah, the Vulcans they can do that. They have that ability. It's just they don't resort to it because it's
not logical. Yeah, there you go.
But it still seemed weird to me.
Yeah, and I to this day I haven't been able to go back and watch the old Star Trek shows just because of the cheese factor.
Yeah, it's pretty cheesy. I watch them on TV, but I don't seek them out. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
And I just want to clarify on my Star Wars answer there that not necessarily the movies. If you look at the entire catalog of books, comic books, Some of the cool ass cartoons that came out, like the amount of really good sci-fi stuff that's in that universe, whether it was Lucas or others, is amazing, and it's a lot of good stuff.
You're talking about all that stuff that never actually happened now.
Yeah, right.
Right, all the stuff that Disney made not count. It's awesome, good stuff. Timothy's on, looking at you, man.
Midi-chlorians?
Friend of the show.
What about midi-chlorians?
Yeah, friends of the show.
Are we pro midi-chlorian or midi-chlorians are friends of the show?
Midichlorians are a wizard in my book.
They're wizard? Are we...
Little
was
wizards.
was that episode 1? Did they say wizard?
Yeah,
I
Anakin's
forgot
little
about that.
friend. Oh, that's wizard, Annie.
Okay.
All right,
forgot about
Star
that.
Trek.
Was
I'm
that the
changing.
Greedo looking? Was that the Greedo looking dude that said,
No, it was his other little human friend. He had like
the little dirty boy, the little street urchin with all the crap on his face.
Yeah.
Wizard, Annie. Yeah.
I'll try a roll. That's a good trick.
You stay in that cockpit, Annie.
Well, okay. Yeah. I want to watch episode 1 now. I never thought I'd say those words in that order, but
You're so wasting time.
okay. Ratings. Let's go in temporal clockwise order. So that would be all three of us at the same time. Ready? Oh, seriously,
Simultaneously?
I'm serious.
Okay. You ready?
1, 2, 3. A yin
hammers
yang
and
with a
sickles.
diamond in one eye and like a iron ore or something in the other eye. Wait, what did you say?
Oh, we both said the same
We
thing.
use the same metric. I don't think we gave the same rating.
No. I said 3 out of 3 hammers and sickles.
I said 4 out of 5 hammers and sickles.
Okay, so we can do that. I mean, you can't take it back, can you?
No, I mean the
Let's
ratings.
lay 3 out of 3, 4 out of 5.
That's
4.5
So I just
out of
combine them?
5.
well, no. We got to get a common denominator. That'd be 15.
15.
So it's
I wonder what Einstein would say about all this. Einstein.
Say to look it up on your ass.
So I've got 12 out of 15 hammers and sickles.
Yeah.
You've got 15 out of 15 hammers and
Yeah,
sickles.
that's true. I do. I give it. It was tough, but I liked it. Yeah.
Okay, so mine, you probably didn't even hear what I said.
No,
because you
well,
guys are sequentists.
Well, apparently we're secret communists.
Not quite so secret.
Not anymore.
All right, I said a yin yang with a diamond in one eye and then like a iron ore or something in the other eye, because it's like the whole idea of like symbiosis and like reconciliation and coexistence.
Circular.
It's like
circular.
It's like the yin yang.
How the hell were we supposed to hear that while we were talking?
I mean, I don't know. I thought maybe you had a flair for the temporal after reading this book, but apparently not.
We can always rewind and hear it again.
Perhaps.
I've always held that an anarcho-communist society would be the best society to live in, and one of the reasons
a kibbutz. You're talking about a kibbutz.
Yeah, and one of the main reasons I enjoyed this book, despite the fact that there was little to no action, there was a lot of hard science in there, was the depiction of a functioning anarcho-communist society, and I absolutely love that.
I don't have to speak. Same here. Yeah.
Concur. Elijah, let's go ahead and pass the torch to you.
Already. Okay. So this is a good book, Ansel. Good job this week.
Second that.
Thanks, guys.
Next week we'll begin my ongoing. It's going to be a 5-part series. All right. You ready for this?
I think so.
All right. Stuff you were supposed to read in high school and probably didn't. All right.
Wasn't that like a David Letterman top 10 list?
Maybe, but I'm only doing 5. So next week we're going to start nice and easy. Nathaniel Hawthorne's. Yeah.
Eat a dick.
Yeah, we're doing it.
I've never read it, so like
You've never read it.
I read it. I was a good student.
We're doing it.
it was never assigned to me in college or high school. I never read it. So,
Really?
Yeah.
Nathaniel Hawthorne's Crimson A. That's what we're doing. Scarlet Letter.
Yeah.
We're doing the Scarlet Letter.
So
and
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
I never. I knew eventually I would have to read it somewhere. I never knew it would. I never knew this. It would be under.
Well, I've got a
This
story
set of
that comes
circumstances.
along with it next week, and
I might not read it out of protest. Like I have read it, unlike you two miscreants.
you know what? That'll be fine actually.
That's
But
not-
that's kind of in the vein of what we're doing.
No, that's not how book club works, man. Book club, you got to read it.
But this is a special series.
I might watch the movie. We'll see.
There's a movie. All right. So next week, pick it up. I'm pretty sure it's free everywhere. I mean, you can find it for free. If not, ask your crusty old English teacher. I'm sure he or she has a copy.
If you go to Barnes and Noble and grab it off the shelf and walk out, probably no one will say anything to you.
I'm down
Saying
with
an
that.
RS, that's not going to fly. Come on now.
I don't think anybody would stop them. I mean, how long's it been on the shelf? So
All right, all right, let me just say, I worked at a bookstore. You will get stopped. You will be arrested. You will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Do not steal the Scarlet Letter and think that it's okay.
But steal the Scarlet Letter.
and think it's okay.
Do not steal the Scarlet Letter and think it's okay. Don't do that.
All right, yeah, we're being a bad influence. I think children are listening.
All right, let's wrap it up, guys.
Yeah, just want to remind everybody to subscribe. Go to iTunes, give us a rating.
Please.
Follow along. You can read the book. We'll have discussions on the Reddit. Yep. It's what's that subreddit?
Subreddit is a bookclubcast.com. It's a subreddit.
Bookclubcast.reddit.com.
Bookclubcast, yeah, it's Bookclubcast. And we'll be on there. We can talk about the book. You can send us questions about the book that we will read and not ever air online. Or maybe we will.
Maybe we will.
Yeah.
You can tweet at us at Bookclubcast.
.tweet?
No,
I don't know how that works.
That's not how Twitter works.
I have no idea. Yeah, but you can do it. And Dylan here will take care of
That's
it.
at Bookclubcast on Twitter. I believe we'll have a Facebook page, that sort of things. Visit our webpage, bookclubcast.com.
That's it. And please do read along. Pick up a copy of Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Scarlet Letter, and it will make your listening experience much more enjoyable. We hope you enjoyed Ursula K. Le Guin's.
I don't think we can make The Scarlet Letter enjoyable.
I think it's enjoyable in its own right. I really do. But as they say, geniuses does not always belong.
If you pretend that the A stands for ass, I bet it makes it way more fun to read. Kind of like you could do with this book.
I would rather become a Puritan and submit to self-flagellation than read that book again.
We're gonna make him read it, folks.
Yeah.
Tune in next week.
All right.
Thanks for listening.
Goodbye.
Peace out.